Because tonight we transition from one special day, the 9th of Kislev, which is both the birthday and the yard site of the Mittler Rebbe, second Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Doiber, the Alter Rebbe's son. And we transition straight in to a very auspicious day, the 10th of Kislev, which was the day that he was released from prison almost exactly a year later. So he passed away a day before we could celebrate the first anniversary of his release. According to tradition, Hasidic tradition, this is why tonight is a little under-celebrated, even though it shouldn't be. It's because the first year there was no opportunity to celebrate because he just passed away a day before. So on the Chabad calendar, we're in a very auspicious period. So I want to backtrack and sort of paint the bigger picture about this period. But first of all, Chen and Jared, and we have over here a birthday boy, right? Bruce is going to be a birthday soon. Yeah, and Attorney Abels, Dr. Kazakov. We're going to go on a journey tonight of the Rebbe's view of this special day that we're getting ready for in 9 days from now. There's a Hasidic saying that says that tonight, the 10th of Kislev, this day of liberation, is the birthday of a Chassid. Someone who's trying to learn Chassidus, someone who's trying to follow the teachings of the Rebbes, this is the birthday. And then the 19th of Kislev is the bris. Now, elsewhere, we're told that the 19th of Kislev is the New Year's of Chassidus. You know, we have a tradition, for example, that we study Tanya a whole year round, each day a little piece. It all starts on the 19th of Kislev. The Rebbe, when he wrote the book Hayom Yom, a daily spiritual calendar, he starts it on Yud Tes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, as the starting point of the year. And this is because, and this is what we're going to learn about today, getting ready for that big day. This is because the first Chabad Rebbe was placed in prison for a total of 53 days, but really the government wanted to stop the expansion, the dissemination, the teachings of Chassidus, because they saw it as a threat to their stability. What we're going to learn today is we're going to see why was the Alter Rebbe, why was the first Chabad Rebbe so insistent on nonetheless continuing to teach Chassidus, even though it was dangerous, why he felt it was so important, and what it means to us. What does this day mean to us today in modern day America?
But the system was Tsarist Russia at that time.
That time was Tsarist Russia. Now I want to give a little introduction. The Tsar, it was before the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay. We're going back a few hundred years, yeah. I first want to give an introduction to the text. What are we learning tonight? Before we get into the substance, I want to speak about what is this? What are we holding in front of our? What are you holding on our hands? The Rebbe spoke for hours and hours, thousands of hours throughout the years. And you could today purchase books of the Rebbe's unedited talks, an entire Farbrengen, an entire sitting, an entire gathering. It could take 50, 60, 75 pages because that gathering took 3, 4, 5 hours. But the Rebbe was very insistent that when it comes to publishing the books, like officially, they should be edited. Edited means that they're first worked over by a team and then presented to the Rebbe. The Rebbe edits it for publication. So I remember as a kid, and then as a young teenager, rushing to shul Friday at sunset. You know, my mother lights the candles, and I would go run to Daven Mincha, we go run to shul, and you would come to shul, and there were fresh booklets, like literally you could feel they're still warm, you could smell fresh booklets. What? booklets like the ones we have in front of our places right now, and this is what we call Likutei Sichos. Likutei Sichos is the Rebbe's edited talks. There are 39 volumes. You'll find for every parsha, every holiday, and as we see here, even for Hasidic holidays like the 19th of Kislev. The reason why I wanted to share this with you is because the talk that we're about to study, at the end it will tell you where it's from, and it's from two Farbrengens, two special sessions that the Rebbe held. And in preparation for tonight, I actually went back and watched those videos because they're weekday Farbrengens. Obviously, the Shabbos Farbrengen you could only get a transcript from, not a video. But this is in the winter of 1986, and it's, for those who know a little bit of the history, it's in the midst of the very painful and difficult trial about the books that were stolen from the Rebbe's library. Mm-hmm. And the case was that year, but the verdict was only a year later, the 5th of Teves, that's a few days after Hanukkah. The Rebbe is here talking while the case is still brewing. And the one thing the Rebbe spoke about that Hanukkah, and by the way, this is consistent, whether he's talking to adults, to children, to the elderly, because there were different groups. The one thing the Rebbe was speaking about was the necessity for simcha, the necessity for joy in order to overcome an obstacle, in order to overcome a difficulty. So much so that when the Rebbe opens the Farbrengen, he sort of a little bit doesn't excuse. He says you don't need a reason to get together. It's a good thing to get together. But he says, still, since it's not so conventional that we just, because this is like the night after the last night of Hanukkah, there was never before such a Farbrengen. The Rebbe says, so since people are asking what's so special about today, you know what we'll do? We'll make a siyum. And then nobody will have any questions, because when you make a siyum, when you finish a volume of the Talmud, everyone knows you make a big celebration. But the Rebbe says, no, the real reason is because since we need extraordinary simcha, extraordinary joy, so we're looking for simcha specifically when it's not normal. The Rebbe says, if it was conventional, if it was expected, then it wouldn't be so joyous. This is extra special joy. But the content of the Farbrengen is about breaking through barriers, overcoming obstacles, especially when it comes to obstacles to serving Hashem and to learning and disseminating Torah and Chassidus. So that's sort of a little bit of a background to the environment of this Sikha, to what's really going on. But I want to share with you as an introduction a little bit of a bird's eye view what we're going to do. The Rebbe is going to give us a roadmap of how to prepare for Moshiach. Now, really, Jewish people are preparing for Moshiach since the beginning of Judaism. We find it, of course, in the Torah. We find it, of course, in the Talmud, definitely Maimonides. You find it all over. But the Rebbe is going to show us how certain events in history are designed to help us along, designed to allow us to prepare for and even taste a little bit of the Moshiach menu. In order to do this, the Rebbe is going to draw a direct line. A direct line from the great events of the 19th of Kislev, that is, the liberation of the first Chabad Rebbe from prison, straight to our reality today. The Rebbe is going to tell us how there are two ways to study Chassidus. There are two ways to study, let's call it Jewish mysticism. One is like the Mishnah, and one is like the Gemara. The Mishnah is very concise, very matter of fact, do's and don'ts, kosher and not kosher. Give me the facts and just the facts. The Mishnah is just the law, so to speak. And then the Gemara is more the logic and the arguments and the rationale and the back and forth. In order to make the central point of the Sikha, the Rebbe is going to show us how there are two reasons why Hasidic philosophy became available to us now over in past years. We'll see how in the past it was deliberately held secret. And only now, in the last few hundred years, do we have access to these mystical teachings of Chassidus. So the Rebbe is going to tell us two reasons. And finally, in order to make this point, the Rebbe is going to introduce two contradictory stories. Two stories in Hasidic tradition that seem to contradict each other. And in order to answer the contradiction, we're going to have a much better understanding of how Chassidus helps us live life today and put us in a position to be ready for Moshiach. I want to introduce 5 words, and then I want to go straight into the Sikha. The Sikha means the talk of the Rebbe, but the reason why I want to introduce these 5 words is because they are key to be able to understand various points of the Sikha. The first word is a word in Aramaic, but it's a spin-off of a word in Hebrew. The first word is Yisparnisun. The root word of Yisparnisun is Parnasah. Parnasah means sustenance, something that sustains you. So the Zohar describes the revelation and dissemination of Jewish mysticism. We're going to call today Chassidus. The Zohar describes it that it should be so ingrained in our reality, it should be so absorbed in our consciousness that Yisparnisun, we should feel sustained by it. In other words, you know, sometimes you hear a thought, but it's a little bit above your head, or maybe something that you can't really grasp, or something that you feel is above your pay grade, or something you think maybe is for some engineer. That means you have the wisdom, but in a very flighty way, in a very abstract way. That's not Yisparnisun. That means you didn't internalize it. It can't sustain you. Chassidus, we're going to see, is designed to be internalized. The second set of words are words that normally are used in the Talmudic lore, in the Talmudic language, and that is the two words of Chefza versus Gavra. Chefza means the item. Gavra means the person. So, for example, putting on tefillin every day is a Gavra responsibility. It's a responsibility of me, the person. There is nowhere in the Torah is there a mitzvah to own tefillin per se. I mean, practically we have to own because we have to put it on. But if I put on tefillin with your tefillin, it's just as much as a mitzvah as if I put on with my own tefillin. Why? Because it's a Gavra, person mitzvah, not a Chefza, thing mitzvah. But for example, just to contrast it, the mitzvah of, let's say, tzitzis or mezuzah, or leaving a corner of your field for the poor, that is chefza. That's because I own a home, therefore I need a mezuzah. Because I have a field, therefore I need to leave the corner. So it's triggered by the item, not so much by the person. It's not a mitzvah, go have a field. The mitzvah is, if you have a field, then you give the corner away. So we did 3 words thus far. Yisparnasun, which means sustained by Torah. Chefza, which means item. And Gavra, which means person. The 4th word is minhago. Minhag, the root word of minhago is minhag, but minhag we think means custom. In this case, it means the normal and natural way of acting. Minhag, the context is minhago shel olam, the way the world works. It's going to be important to understand this because the Rambam tells us that Moshiach is not going to change minhago, is not going to change the way things operate. In other words, we are going to graduate into a new reality, maintaining our regular nature. So the word minhago is going to be important. And finally, the last word is a word that I'm also going to show you how the Rambam sprinkles it in different places. But the word is liyasher. Liyasher means different things in different contexts, but it definitely means to prepare for something, to straighten. Literally, it means like to straighten out, but it means to get on a certain path. These 5 words are going to be key to understanding this talk. The 5 words are Yisparnasun, making it real, sustaining me. Chefza, item, Gavra, person. Minhago, the normal and natural way. And Liyasher means getting ready in a methodical way. So the Rebbe is going to start by introducing 2 seemingly contradictory stories. And that's going to be the platform upon which we can understand what Chassidus means to us and how this day, the 19th of Kislev, puts us in a position to be ready for Moshiach. Should I read it in?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
I think I'll read it inside, and in between each paragraph, go ahead and give the translation. Okay, and give the explanation.
The 5 words you mentioned, is your construct, it is coming from the Rebbe.
They're all in here, and I consider them to be key words to understand this talk. You'll see, I'll highlight them as we go. Many, you ask a Chabad kid, and he'll tell you the story. The story is that there was once a child of a king who was deathly ill, and even further deteriorating, further and further, like hopeless. And all the doctors came and they said, what are we going to do? How can we help the king? How can we help the prince? Nobody had a solution. Besides one, I guess, outlier, one creative doctor. He said, you know what? I have one solution. It's the only solution. I'm not sure it's going to work, but it's the only potential solution. What is that? There's a certain mineral that's found in a certain stone, a certain gem, that if you feed the kid this mineral, it can help him. Problem is the kid couldn't swallow anymore. He was just laying there like this. And they found out that where do you have this special stone? That stone is the crown jewel of the crown of the king. So now the king has to make a decision. Is he ready to grind up the crown jewel that he probably got from his grandfather, and his grandfather got from his grandfather, and this is like the sign of royalty, grind it up, mix it together with water, and try to feed it to this kid. Maybe one drop will go in and give him some remedy. King, of course, is a father to the prince, so he decides, as difficult as it is, to grind up this precious stone, but if this is the only chance, he's going to give it a try. And the story is told, the parable sort of here is that the king says, yes, let's do it, and the child is revived by that little drop, and this is considered a metaphor for Chassidus. How is it a metaphor for Chassidus? Let's get into it right now. All right, there's 5 chapters to this talk. We're starting Aleph. Misupar, it is told, that when the first Chabad Rebbe was in prison, he had special visitors from heaven. Rabbi Yosef Wolvovsky, his Rebbes, the Alter Rebbe, of course, succeeded his teacher, the Maggid. The Maggid's name was Dovber, and tonight we are celebrating the day of the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son. He named his son Dovber after his teacher, the Maggid. And the Maggid's teacher was the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. So the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov already passed away. They came to visit him in prison. Who are they? Rabbi Harava Maggid v'Baal Shem Tov Nishos Eden. Okay, so now you have the situation where the Alter Rebbe is in prison, and it's a big threat against the future of their whole enterprise, teaching Chassidus, which Chassidus, of course, teaches us about the power of the soul and the power of every mitzvah and how everything we do changes the world. But now it's all in danger because he's in prison. The Shah, the Alter Rebbe, the prisoner, turns to his teachers who visited him from heaven and asks them, Lama magia loi sheyesh lebemaiser. Why do I deserve to be imprisoned? All I'm doing is disseminating Chassidus. All I'm doing is doing my life's mission the way you taught me. Teach Torah, teach Chassidus, and it'll be good. What is wanted from me? Asked the Alter Rebbe of his teachers in his prison cell. They shivuloi, and they answered him, and they said, "Shanis chazek olav hakitrug." There's a concept called kitrug. Kitrug means a decree from above because something we're doing is not aligned with the way it should be, so to speak. So a kitrug means when there's a stern judgment from heaven. So they told him that there's a kitrug upon him. There's a judgment against him from heaven. They said it wasn't, this is not some, people went to the government and said that you're making trouble. By the way, history repeats itself, and one of the reasons in the actual complaint against the Alter Rebbe was the fact that he's supporting the enemy. Who was the enemy? He was in Tsarist Russia. The enemy was the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire then occupied the land of Israel, and he was sending tzedakah money to the poor people of Israel. And part of the complaint that was written up against him was that he's supporting the enemy because he's sending money to enemy territory, to the Ottomans, when really he was supporting the poor Jewish people. But we see how certain world powers just keep on emerging in our history. But they said, no, this is not some people came and told the government and therefore, no, there's an actual spiritual decree against you. Why? Al sha'omer divrei Chassidus harbe. Because he's spreading so much Chassidus, uvegiloi, and in a revealed way. In other words, not hiding anything. You have to understand that for most of Jewish history, thousands of years, these secrets, the secrets of Kabbalah, the secrets of Jewish mysticism, were exactly that, secrets. We're going to see soon how both in the Talmud and in the Rambam, based on verses, they say these secrets are meant to be kept secret. And here, the Alter Rebbe is disseminating it so in such great abundance and in such great accessibility, they said there's a decree against you. So now the Alter Rebbe in his prison cell turns to his Rebbes and he says, "V'kasher eitze mikan, when I leave here, hayim afsik mileimar divrei Chassidus, should I stop spreading Chassidus?" Now, thank God, we don't need to know the sikha to know the answer because we're learning Chassidus right now. So we know obviously that he didn't stop. But this story is the Alter Rebbe in prison. They shivu lo, and they answered and they said, "Kivan she'ischalta, since you started, al tafsik, do not stop. Va'adarabba, even more. L'kshateitze, when you leave, tema yoser, even more." In other words, what they're saying really in essence is, when not only are we going to overcome the obstacles here on earth, we're also going to overcome the heavenly obstacles to spreading Chassidus. Ad kan teichen hasipur, this is a story. First name, please.
Raphael.
Raphael, yes.
What caused that flip with you
Oh.
can't teach Chassidus to teach more?
Very good. Very good. In order to get to that point, we're going to have to ask a question. The question is, this story seems to be a repeat of a previous story, which makes it not make sense at all. So we're going to have to figure out what's this idea of an obstacle, a spiritual obstacle, and then we overcome it through human effort. What's the pivot point, let's call it? Kloimar, meaning to say, in this view, Masarei Sharabeinu Azakin Lamata Bagashmius, the Alter Rebbe's imprisonment wasn't just a earthly event, but rather Nishtal Shaluba, it's a reflection of a spiritual thing, Me'akitrug Lemaila, from a decree in heaven, on his liberal way of spreading Chassidus. No strings attached, everyone's welcome to hear. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe has now a real question, because if they would tell him, oh, the problem is we have some people here on earth who are making problems, but you're doing the right thing, then fine, no question, when I get out, I'm going to do it. But since they told him there's a kitrug from heaven, so he has now a real question. The question is, maybe I should slow down. Maybe you should stop. And this they had to answer him. When you leave, you're going to do it. You should do even more. Okay, this is just explanation of the story. Now remember, I told you a story before about a king and his crown and his jewel and grinding it up and feeding it to the child. We didn't mention that yet in this text. Where does that other story come from? It sounds very that story also, we're going to see, that story also has to do with this idea of a kitrug. Now, we're not going to have time to get to it today, but the quote that we're about to read is from an extensive letter of the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe wrote prolifically, very colorful, and he gives a lot of details about the background to the story we're about to, the second story that's in this sikha. You see, this idea of attempting to slow down the dissemination of Chassidus and of Jewish mysticism and of Kabbalah is not just like people who didn't like it. No, the opposite. In the beginning, it was those who cherished it most said, it's so precious, you can't just put it out there. By the way, if I would ask you this question, right at the beginning of this conversation, I would say, do you think Kabbalah is ever misused? Yeah? Do you think Kabbalah ever falls into the wrong hands? So now it's a risk to just take these secrets of divine wisdom and put them out there. So for most of Jewish history, the answer was, you're right, you keep it secret. So we're going to see soon there's a formula, literally teacher to student, and you have to first evaluate if the student is worthy. You don't just go out there and teach. You don't just translate Chassidus or Kabbalah into English and into French and into Portuguese and into Russian and put it out there. So those who were protective of the mystical teachings were really originally not the opposers of Chassidus. It was the greatest Chassidim, because they felt it has to be treated with the utmost respect, and in their mindset, respect and reverence meant exclusive. So the previous Rebbe writes in this letter how when the Maggid, a generation earlier, this same Maggid who came to visit him from heaven, that Maggid, when the Maggid was teaching Chassidus, also pushing the boundaries, there were some of the Maggid's followers, and he brings names here, who were worried about it. They felt that you're cheapening the secret. And here, a story happened. So now the Rebbe's question is going to be, introducing the second story, is that Deidish Beer. This requires an explanation. This whole story of the Alter Rebbe in prison, and the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov coming to him, and him asking, and them answering, this whole story has to be understood, because Kitrug Misug Zeh, a very similar Kitrug, that means a very similar decree, Kvar Haya Bisman Nisyush Shel Maggid, already happened once, a generation earlier, in the days of the Maggid. It has known the story. What happened then? What happened then? So it says, Shapam, that once, Masuk Sav Shal Chassidus, Sheis Galgal Makim Bil Tiroi. The Chassidim were walking about and they found a page of Chassidus in an inappropriate place. It doesn't say exactly where. It could be the floor, could be literally maybe near the trash, whatever. But and could you imagine? For thousands of years, we're holding it secret, and we don't put it into any type of writing. And now suddenly it's being written down, and it's being disseminated, and you find it defiled that way. V'nase kitrug l'mayla ala magid. And the previous Rebbe goes into more details of how a certain of the leader of the Chassidim was very upset about this, and this created a kitrug, again, a decree in heaven on the Magid, on the Alter Rebbe's teacher, that you know what, the Magid is taking it too far. The Alter Rebbe's teacher is taking it too far, to the extent that look what happens. And what happened? Sure enough, one of the Magid students, specifically his youngest student, and who is that? The Alter Rebbe himself. This Alter Rebbe, who's now sitting in prison, what did he do? The Alter Rebbe, Rabbeinu Hazaken, bitel kitrug. He got rid of the decree. How? Because the Alter Rebbe said the story of the king and the crown and the jewel and the child. He started saying, the story goes that this person was screaming, how could there be pages of Chassidus on the floor? And the Alter Rebbe stops and starts saying a story. What's the story? There's a mashal, mi ben melech, a prince, shenechla machal mesukenes, that was deathly ill. There's only one potential solution. What is that? To take the royal crown, to take the crown jewel of the royal crown, which really that is the literal definition of royalty, to grind it up and to mix it into water, and to try to pour it between the lips of the child, of the prince, b'tikva, and the hope, that maybe, just maybe, one drop will enter and save him. So the Alter Rebbe brings this whole example and this whole story to do what? To get rid of a decree, to get rid of a kitrug. And what happened? Shekenu b'nad nidan. The Alter Rebbe said this is exactly our story, that we have the Jewish people who are God's prince, and we are unfortunately deteriorating spiritually. And if you go back to those generations, there's a lot of sorrows, both materially and spiritually. And the Jewish people, looks like, didn't have a hope for revitalization. Said the Alter Rebbe, publicizing the secrets of the Torah, which is this Evan Yakar Shabakesed HaMelech. This is Hashem's royal jewel. Kedayu, it's worthy to disseminate it in such a way lahatzlas chai ben HaMelech HaMisot, to save the Jewish people. So just like in the case of the king, the child is unfortunately deteriorating, but he's ready to take the risk and waste most of he's grinding it up. And how much is going to go into the mouth, you don't know. So much of it is going to pour out. He's going to waste a lot of the crown jewel. Why? On the chance that it could save the kid. Said the Alter Rebbe, this is exactly what's happening. The Jewish people need a special medicine. The Jewish people need a special shot in the arm. A special revitalizing force. What is that? That's Chassidus. That is the secrets of the Torah. And by the way, we see it in real life, because this idea that any Yid is welcome, and that regardless of your religious status, you could come and daven, and you could come and put on tefillin in the street, and you could come and study Torah regardless of your affiliation. This is a Chassidic mindset that today permeates most of the world, because we appreciate the power of the neshama based on the teachings of Chassidus. Okay, so now we have two stories. We have the story of the Alter Rebbe in prison, in that cell with his visitors from heaven, and we have the story of the Alter Rebbe and the way he presents this whole idea of the king and the child and the stone. But this is a big question. According to this, if these two stories happened one generation after another, if the Alter Rebbe already got rid of the heavenly blockage, if he already answered the question with his beautiful parable of the king and the crown and the child, and he made the point so strong to say this is necessary to save Hashem's children, the Jewish people. So, alachas kam v'kama, how much more so? Kishavar oid shlabedis hadoros, the next generation that didn't get better. Uminastam yarad matzav eiruch sheben hamelach. The Jewish people needed even more help. Harei bevadai shadivri Chassidus. How much more so that the Chassidus and in the parable, schikas ha'even hayakara shebekesed hamelach, grinding up this crown jewel, hu achi achrechi, it's the most necessary thing, la'atzal chai nafshei shel ben hamelach, to save the king's child, to save the prince. So if that's the case, what did the Alter Rebbe do differently, or what changed? That again you have the same blockage, he already got rid of it. Because of him continuing to teach Chassidus. So much so that the Alter Rebbe took it so seriously. You have to understand, this same person, the Alter Rebbe, who fended off a previous obstacle, a previous spiritual obstacle, by bringing this example of the king's royal crown and the royal stone, this same Alter Rebbe now has a doubt. How could it be that the Alter Rebbe now has a doubt whether he should continue doing what he's doing when he is the one who told us that it's the most necessary thing to save the Jewish people, and he needed his teachers from heaven, the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, had to come and tell him that you should keep on doing it and do even more. So he presented two stories. The story of the Alter Rebbe in prison and the heavenly visitors. This is the prison cell revelation. And then we presented the story of the Alter Rebbe, how he fended off a previous kitrug. We're talking now about the crown jewel. The obvious question is, if you already got rid of any blockages with the crown jewel parable, how could we have the same problem again? And how could the Alter Rebbe take it so seriously to think maybe he should stop? With this is the platform for understanding what makes the Alter Rebbe specifically unique. Till now we were using the word Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe taught Chassidus, but introduced the system of Chabad. And what we're going to have to understand is that the leap from regular Chassidus, let's call it generic, to Chassidus Chabad is so vast that even the Alter Rebbe thought maybe the kitrug, maybe the obstacle is too strong for that type of revelation, for that type of dissemination. Okay, any questions or comments before we go to chapter 2? Okay. Chapter 1, 2 stories and a question, right? You with me? Yeah. Chapter 2 is going to tell us, it's going to go back a little bit big picture. And that is, how could there be such a thing, the availability of Chassidus at all, when for thousands of years we maintained that it has to be a secret? And here's where we're going to be introduced to several of the key words, including Gavra and Chefza, item versus person. Chapter 2 on page 171.
Who is we for 1,000 years?
All the Jewish people. We're going to learn now. You're going to see how the Talmud, the Rambam, based on verses, prove that Chassidus and really any Jewish mysticism has to be tightly controlled. So the question is, how does that change? This is going to be like the secondary question to explain how these two stories actually do make perfect sense with each other. Says the Rebbe, chapter 2, we could understand this. Behektim bir divrei harizal. The person who really open the gates of Jewish mysticism is the Arizal. The Arizal is buried in Tzfas, Rabbi Isaac Luria.
I just visited him a month ago.
See that? You feel a connection. Definitely the Alter Rebbe bases his philosophy on the teaching of the Arizal, but the Arizal is the one who not only taught Chassidus or taught Kabbalah, more than that. He said, Shedafke b'doros elu, that in these generations, hachronim, these later generations, mutar, it is permissible, u'mitzvah, and it is a mitzvah, legalo yizveis hachachma, to reveal this secret wisdom. The Arizal comes along and makes a revolutionary statement. The statement is, what till now you thought was inappropriate is now an obligation, a mitzvah. Despite the fact that in earlier generations, this wisdom of Kabbalah, this Jewish mysticism was nistera, hidden. Even the The sages, it was considered a secret for them. There were a cherished few that actually studied Kabbalah, and even those who did, specifically in a very quiet way. We're going to see soon, the next paragraph, the Rebbe is going to give us a quote from the Gemara, from the Talmud, that the Talmud quotes from the Torah. The Talmud is going to quote that it's meant to be secret. Mikiv and Shahir Chazal, since the sages tell us, Shadvarim Shehem Kivshoyne Shaloilam, Sisr Shaloilam, Yud Tes Kislev. There's a verse. I'm going to pull it up over here. I'm going to pull it up for you in the Rambam. Okay. In Proverbs, there are two words that are highlighted in this piece of the Talmud that we're learning now. Literally, the translation of these words is lambs for your clothing. Okay, so you could use lamb material for your clothing, but the word is kvashim lilvushecha. The Talmud comes along and says a play on words, and that is kvushim, which means things that are secret. Kvushim means like hidden inside other things. Lilvushecha should be your garments, which essentially the connotation is keep to yourself. So the Talmud already says that Dvarim Shem Kivshoyne Shaloilam, Sisha Shaloilam, the secrets of the universe, that means the secrets of Hashem, you tachas levushecha. Just keep inside your garments, keep quiet yourself. There are certain conditions and limitations how you could disseminate Kabbalah. And the truth is, what I just read from you is a quote from the Rambam quoting the Talmud. The Rambam, when he wrote his book, there's in the beginning of the Rambam is 14 volumes. There's Hilchas Yesoidei HaTorah, and he speaks about these ideas, keeping it secret. So the question is, how suddenly do we come now, and the Arizal, a few hundred years later, comes and says, it's a mitzvah to reveal it? What changed?
Just on chronology, the Arizal is how soon before the Baal Shem Tov?
What year is Arizal? You want to?
I'm just
15.
Yeah, it's 1500s, but
Right here, 50, right? Yitzchak ben Shlomo.
yeah.
1534.
It's 100, it's only 100 years before the Baal Shem.
Before the Baal Shem Tov. How many years after the Rambam?
How many years after? 500 years.
Yeah, a little 400. Yeah, 450 years. Yeah. So now you get a little bit of the picture. Yes, the Talmud, the Rambam, the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov. So the Rebbe says we have to understand this whole idea of limiting Torah knowledge. Overhektim. Move on. The Rebbe says it's understood. This idea of limiting dissemination of Kabbalah, it's not because there's something, God forbid, wrong with that wisdom that has to be kept separate, or that the wisdom is designed to be secret. No, for instance, big picture, we're going to get to this soon. Big picture, the same Rambam who tells us that we have to be very careful about how we disseminate Kabbalah is the same Rambam who says that when Moshiach comes, that's all we're going to do, every person all day long. Study divine knowledge, secrets of the Torah, Kabbalah, Chassidus. So how do you get from there to there? So the first thing to understand is this is not a cheftza problem. In other words, it's not that the Torah doesn't want to be revealed. No, it's not that we say this must remain secret because it is secretive. No, it's not a cheftza thing. Rather, the problem is we can't handle it. We're not ready. The key, since most people cannot really grasp it in a healthy way, therefore, you could learn this part of the Torah. It could actually hurt you. It could drive you crazy. You could say, I don't understand it, and therefore you could run away from it. You could be misused. As we said before, it could fall into the wrong hands. But as far as the Torah is concerned, it's an equal part of Torah, like every other part of Torah, that every Jew owns it. It is our birthright. Not only that, every Jew has to try to reach the point where he could study every part of Torah, including Chassidus, including Kabbalah, whatever generation you're at. Especially if you consider that the Rambam tells us that this is our ultimate destiny anyway. What does the Rambam say? In the time of Moshiach, everything we're going to do is all going to be focused on knowing God. He didn't say studying Torah. We're going to know God through Torah, but that's Kabbalah, that's Chassidus. And therefore, it says the Rambam when Moshiach comes, we're all going to know all the secrets. And we'll be able to understand God as much as a human being could. And he quotes the prophet. The prophet Yeshaya says, the knowledge of God will fill the earth, just like water fills the bed of the sea. So it can't be that this part of Torah is destined to be secret, like it must be secret. How could that be? You say Mashiach comes, it's going to be revealed to everybody. So it must be that the problem is only in the Gavra. It's a me problem. I can't handle it right now. So we see clearly, Mashiach comes, we're all going to study Chassidus Kabbalah all day. When Mashiach comes, we're going to spend most of our time studying not the regular, let's call it technical, legal, analytical Torah, which is what we study mostly now, but rather exploring Hashem, Dvarim Astumim, things that are secret. And this is going to be everyone's pursuit, not just the elite few. And how? It's going to be all over the place. So we'll move on. So all these limitations that we spoke about, the Talmud says, be careful, it has to be one-to-one, has to be evaluated, it has to be secret. All that's out the window when Mashiach comes. But 1 second. What's going to change? In other words, this goes against the same Rambam who tells us when Mashiach comes, that's all we're going to do a whole day. The same Rambam who says that there's Tunoyim v'agbalas b'chachzelu. And the truth is that when Mashiach comes, the Rebbe says in the parentheses, Torah is not going to change in terms of the law. So if the law is that it should be secret, it's going to stay secret. So it must be, there's no law that it should be secret. The law is you have to be able to handle it before it's revealed to you. And we can't handle it, or at least we couldn't handle it for most of history. Therefore, you must say, the whole reason why the Talmud and the Rambam will ever tell us that you should keep it secret is only because most people today, most people can't handle it. We're at the top of page 172. And therefore, the Torah gave us certain strings attached, certain limitations, certain parameters. But when Mashiach comes, Mashiach will introduce certain new environmental issues. For instance, no hunger, no war, no jealousy. Every one of us will be able to fully concentrate without any agenda, without any ego, without any distraction, focus on the knowledge of God. So now when you have the problems are removed, so now we can handle it. We didn't answer, by the way, any question yet, because unfortunately Mashiach's not here yet. And we still can't handle it. And we know that By the way, we can even know it from our own experience, that sometimes we could misunderstand or even misuse a teaching of the Torah. And for sure, disseminating it out there to the world at large. All we answered was that it can't be an absolute no. Because if it's an absolute no, then it wouldn't be available when Moshiach comes. So it must be that these secrets are destined to be revealed. But we can't handle it now, therefore it's secret. Okay, but that's until the Arizal. What happened by the Arizal? What happened by the Baal Shem Tov? What happened to Alter Rebbe? Suddenly they're pushing the envelope and saying, reveal it now, reveal it now. Mashiach's not here yet. When in these generations comes the Arizal and says it's a mitzvah to reveal it, despite the fact that until now we had all these strings attached. But why? Says the Rebbe, there are two explanations to why we would go ahead and reveal the secrets of the Torah, divine secrets, Kabbalah and Chassidus, even before Mashiach comes. One of them, the first reason will be, you see, there's another twist on history, which is the Rambam, the same Rambam who says that you should keep it all secret, wrote a book. And the book is called Meir Nevuchim. It's commonly translated as Guide to the Perplexed. And in his introduction, in his opening to the book of Meir Nevuchim, he says that really these things should stay secret. In other words, he's going to address things that he feels should never really be spoken. But since there are people who are wandering, and since there are people who are lost, and since there are people who can't find their way, so he's going to reveal secrets, or he's going to show them, he's going to introduce questions and answers that should be able to help them, so that you should not be perplexed anymore. So the Rambam says, the reason why he wrote his book that have some secrets, he says, and he quotes the Talmud, there's a verse in Tehillim that says that in times of emergency is emergency rule. Emergency rule means that the normal rules change. It's a time to do for Hashem, and therefore change the rules. Now you can't do it about everything, but the items that are not biblically mandated, you're not going against the Torah instruction that says clear, don't do it. So the sages have flexibility based on the needs of the generation. And in this case, it's the need of a trajectory of generations. Says the Rambam, because the Jewish people are in a perplexed state, which Nevuchim really means really like despondent and lowly and lost, this compelled him, the Rambam, to reveal secrets in order to bring people back to the way of the faith. So the Rambam himself, hundreds of years before the Arizal, already has a model for this idea of saying, even though the Talmud says it's a secret and has to be from person to person, and even though I myself, the Rambam, put it in my book that that's the way it's supposed to be, but in case of emergency, break the glass. And he says it's an emergency. And therefore he writes Moed Nevuchim. Moed Nevuchim is not as accessible to most people as, let's say, the books of Chassidus that we have today, but it's a model to say that when there's an emergency, when there's a unique need, you let the secrets out. And this would be a direct parallel to the revelation of Chassidus now. Because the fact that we think about it, we don't stop so often and think about this, but many of us, and definitely many people that I meet, you say, like for example, comes Pesach, or now Hanukkah. People try to do like maybe a tenth or a third or a quarter of what their Zaydis and Bubbies did. It's like we're holding on to some shtetl reality. But the truth is, there's some truth to that idea that the more you go on in history, you have more challenges to people being completely observant, to people keeping Torah mitzvahs. So this is called Yiridas Hadoros. So now when you have this idea going on over time, that you have generations of dissent, shenismatu alavavis, less passion for Yiddishkeit, v'chein mitzad matzav ha'olam b'chlalusa, yisharab b'deres elu, hu bizgabes yiseder, and especially when you look at the environment, the way it affects us. So mahava hechrich rav l'galis yisachachma. So we need a special shot of energy. We need a special, you could call it either an inoculation or you could call it an energy drink, but we need something to be able to go to battle in this otherwise turbulent world that's becoming even more turbulent. And that is Pnimis HaTorah. That is the innermost secrets of the Torah. What does it do for us? It ignites our internal energies, which otherwise would be hidden. This gives us special powers to overcome the darkness of Galus, both from the outside and our internal challenges, to serve Hashem fully. So the first reason why we could spill the beans, break the glass, let it out of the bag of Chassidus and Kabbalah, the first reason is the same reason that the Rambam himself gave for writing the Guide to the Perplexed. And that is, if there's an emergency situation out there, if the Jewish people are suffering uniquely from a spiritual decline, we need a special shot of energy. And what is that? Another secret of the Torah, another secret. And we see today many people, Chassidus, and the ways of Chassidus and the teaching of Chassidus ignite our internal fire, ignite our soul in a way that brings us back to Hashem. So it's working. In other words, the medicine of the crown, in a case of emergency, you grind it up and you put it in the mouth of the child, revives us. That's reason number one. And reason number two, matzinu kama inyonim shaboy mitarachana li'moisa Mashiach. There are some things that are a preparation for Mashiach. Now, what's interesting is the Rebbe is about to quote the Rambam. The Rambam says a few things that are preparation for Chassidus, for preparation for Mashiach. One of them is completely positive, and the other two are controversial. So much so that in many versions of the Rambam, they don't print it because they're afraid, not now, we're going back hundreds of years, afraid of the way the non-Jews will take it. Here's where the word liyasher comes in. Liyasher. The Rambam says about three things that it is liyasher, to pave the way for Mashiach. The one that we all know, I think, is Elijah the prophet. He says, before Mashiach comes, Eliyahu Hanavi will come liyasher, to straighten us out, to get us ready for Mashiach. But he also says that the advent of other religions, and he mentions religions and people by name, are there to get the world ready for the concept of faith, so that everyone is ready for this idea that one day there'll be a Mashiach. Uvalashon Rambam, the Rambam says, Liyasher Yisrael l'hachan libam, to straighten us out and to prepare us. Liyamois HaMashiach. Now, if the Rambam tells us already that certain things are embedded in history to get us ready for Mashiach, and he gives us a few examples, Eliyahu Hanavi, Christianity, Islam, he puts it all in there. So there are major stories in history designed to get us ready for Mashiach. So for sure, there has to be some preparation in the fundamental idea of Mashiach. And what's the fundamental of Mashiach? We already said earlier, is that we'll be occupied 100% with the knowledge of God. And as the Rambam says, the only reason why we really want Mashiach is so that we should be available, we should have the time and the mind space to be able to study Torah. We should be able to engage in the knowledge of God. This cannot happen overnight. And by the way, here, I'm going to finish the paragraph, then I'm going to show you a footnote. In footnote 29, the Rebbe says something beautiful. And that is like this. The Rambam tells us that Mashiach is not going to shatter nature. It's going to take our nature, Mashiach environment takes our nature and sort of morphs it into a new reality, but we're still going to be us. This is why people always look for signs. You say, oh wow, this event is getting the world ready for Mashiach. If Mashiach is just a miraculous thing that comes up from heaven one day, you don't need any signs. One day it's done. No, there's supposed to be worldly events that prepare us for Mashiach. The Rebbe pointed out some of these signs. For example, for most of human history, war was considered the norm. In the last 70 years, 75 years, let's say, even though we're not saying there's less war, there's a lot of war, we all know that, but war is considered abhorrent. In other words, the universe understands that wars should be stopped or avoided. How good of a job we're doing at that is another question. But for most of human history, there wasn't even a discussion. War is life. War is the way it works. That's an example that the Rebbe highlighted, how the human mind universally is adjusting towards a Mashiach mindset. There are other examples like this. So the Rebbe says like this: if Mashiach is not meant to be a shattering of our reality, imagine if there was no Chassidus, God forbid, no Kabbalah, all we're doing is studying the literal, technical parts of the Torah, and then Mashiach comes and gives us the whole Kabbalah, we can't handle it. And the Rebbe uses an interesting word. The Rebbe says, if it would be a surprise, so then it would be changing our nature. No, there has to be a gradual lead up to Mashiach. The gradual lead up is, you do a little Meir Nevuchim, you do a little Arizal, you do a little Baal Shem Tov, and finally you get to Chabad. So what did we do? In chapter 1, we presented 2 stories, and we said these stories they shouldn't really be 2 stories. If the Alter Rebbe already fended off the heavenly decree, the heavenly obstacle, why is it again? The Rebbe says, wait, in order to understand, let's go big picture, and that is, how do we have Chassidus at all? And now we have a legal understanding, a historic understanding, because we're not saying, by the way, this is not like, wow, we came up with an invention. We see that this is the way it was done in generations before. Not just by the Alter Rebbe, not just by the Baal Shem Tov, but by the Arizal, and even before that by the Rambam himself. Which means that revealing the secrets of the Torah is not inherently problematic. It was problematic for most of history because, number one, it wasn't necessary for our survival, so therefore if it's not necessary for our survival, we say, don't take the risk. Just like the king wouldn't one day wake up and grind his gemstone. But once it's necessary for our survival, as it is for us today, and as the Arizal determined it to be a few hundred years ago, so now we say, as a preparation for Mashiach, we need 2 things. Number 1, we need this agent, this medicine to keep us going. And number 2, we need to get used to the idea that this is what's happening. We're heading towards a reality in which all the secrets are going to be accessible to all of us. Mandy, what's our time limit? Because I don't know what to...
Just go.
I know, I could keep on going.
Yeah, just go.
Yeah, just go? Okay.
Until Moshiach comes.
Andy, I thought you were in charge.
Until Moshiach comes.
I selfishly wanted to finish, but I understand that people need to go home.
No, either way I'm going to finish. The question if I should finish with an outline or if I should finish inside. Who has to leave when? Let's just do it's a democratic over here. Okay, I'm going to keep on going until somebody says I got to go, and then I'll give you a quick.
Do you want to do this? Do you want to do the summary and then go to the detail? I mean, so we can get
Okay, let's do that. Let's do it.
Do the summary,
Let's do
after the
summary,
people leave, and
No, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the summary, and I'm going to highlight some key words on the inside. Okay. So what the Rebbe just did is he laid out for us 2 reasons of why we need Chassidus. Number 1, a medicine for survival. Number 2, getting in the Mashiach mindset. But these 2 reasons will also change the nature of what Chassidus is, or at least what's accessible to us. Here the Rebbe introduces Chassidus as if he analyzes Chassidus as if it could be a legal document. And he says, if you look at the Talmud is divided into two primary sources. The Mishnah, and the Mishnah is straight up law. It's designed to be brief and to the point. And then you have the Gemara, which is intricate and back and forth and complicated, and questions take up much more space. And only about okay. Now, what is Chassidus? Is Chassidus more like the Mishnah? Give you a headline, give you a point, give you a statement? Or is it more like the Gemara, which means you could go back and forth, and you could ask questions, and you could spend pages and hours? Says the Rebbe like this. If the goal is to save the Jewish people, if the goal is to give us medicine, if the goal is, let's say, to keep us alive, like the example of that prince laying in bed who needs this mixture of minerals from the gem with the water. So then, just like the metaphor, all you need is one drop. You need a jolt. You need a power. You need a statement. You need encouragement. So if the goal is goal number one, which is keep us alive, give us medicine against this darkness, then all you need is words, like quick words of inspiration, straight up statements, brief like the Mishnah. Indeed, that is what the Baal Shem Tov did. How many books are there from the Baal Shem Tov? Two, maybe. It's collections of different pieces in different places. Right. And all the talks of the Baal Shem Tov were very brief, inspirational teachings, brief and to the point. Is that enough to revive the Jewish people? Yes. That is the medicine against the darkness of Galus. That is the medicine against our internal troubles that we have during Galus. However, that's not the same as what we need to be ready for Moshiach. And this is where the word Yisparnesun comes in. The Zohar says that the vision is that we should be sustained by Chassidus. This word is very important because it means something that you could digest, you could process, you could internalize. Not a jolt of inspiration that's, momentary and a flash, but rather something that could ruminate in your mind, something that could change the way you think about the world, something that could really sustain us. And that's what the Alter Rebbe was trying to do. The whole definition of Chabad is that we could process it, absorb it, understand it in our minds. Not to be not to be inspired emotionally and spiritually, but rather to be overtaken intellectually in a way that we could really process, understand, in a way that our human mind, our secular mind, should be able to understand Chassidus and therefore understand the ways of Hashem. So we started, in the beginning, we started with a question, assuming that the Alter Rebbe was, expanding the enterprise a little bit around the edges. The Baal Shem Tov did a little, the Magi did a little more, and the Alter Rebbe did a little more. And then we asked, if that's the case, how could there be a kitrug, how could there be a divine decree against the Alter Rebbe? And why would the Alter Rebbe take it seriously when he himself already fended it off with the parable of the king? But now we see no. Something changed dramatically when the Alter Rebbe instituted the teachings of Chabad. This is why we consider the Tanya to be the Bible of Chabad. Why? Because it's an organized, methodical, systematic way of seeing the world, seeing ourselves, seeing our relationship to Hashem. It's not a jolt of inspiration. It's a process of learning and internalizing and changing and growing. So when the Alter Rebbe is introducing an entirely new way of relating to Hashem, not just emotional sparks, not just spiritual jolts, but a way of thinking that changes everything about the way we see ourselves, the world, and Hashem, suddenly there is a new kitrug, there is a new blockage, there is a new decree, because it's almost like you could turn to the Alter Rebbe and say, yeah, you gave us the example of the king and the crown, but for that, we have the Baal Shem Tov already. For that, we have the drops that are falling into the mouths of the Jewish people. We're fine. And it's almost like the Alter Rebbe has to come back and say, we're fine to survive, but this doesn't prepare us for Moshiach. This doesn't change our mindset. This doesn't do Yispar Nesun. Yispar Nesun means that we are sustained by it. So there's some interesting little footnotes. The Rebbe, for instance, highlights a nuanced difference between two places in the Talmud where it speaks about people who explored the secrets of the Torah. In one place it says nichnesu, which means they went in. Another place it says letayel. Letayel means to spend time there, let's say. So, Shvatzir, exactly. So basically, when you hear Chassidus, not all Chassidus is equal, is a trajectory. There's a history of how it develops. And early on, Chassidus was very short and inspirational, like the Mishnah, let's call it. Now, from the days of the Alter Rebbe and on, it's much more like the Gemara, methodical, analytical, questions, answers, much more mind space, and it takes much more absorbing. And therefore, it's not like the drop that saves the child, but rather it's like the expansive study that sustains us. And therefore, it really does prepare us for Mashiach. Now, the Rebbe concludes, as he often does in chapter 5, to say that really it's all about action. And now that we know that the floodgates of Chassidus are open, and now that we know the reason why, and the reason is because this is our path, liyasher, this is our path to get ready for Mashiach. And now that we know that it's designed to be that way, in other words, yes, the glass has been broken, but it wasn't illegal. In other words, it's designed to be in such a way that at some point before Mashiach, we should have access to these teachings. So now we know that not only is it not enough to dabble in Chassidus, which means a little here, a little there. That would be more like going back in history, going back to a time when all you're looking is for a little word of inspiration, a little jolt, a little here. And not only, the Rebbe said something even more. The Rebbe said not only do we have to absorb and learn and process it, the Rebbe says even more, quoting the Alter Rebbe in his laws of studying Torah, that we have an obligation to look for our own contribution. The word is lechadesh. To sort of, like think about here, this talk, what happened? The Rebbe took one story and another story, contrasted them and built a whole theology on it. A drop of that feeling we could get when we study Chassidus and we see, if you study one place, you study another place, you have a question. You have a question. You look for a source. You ask the rabbi. You ask a friend. And what do you end up getting? You end up getting your novel contribution, l'chadish, which you can only do if you first process properly. Why is this so important? Because by doing so, by learning the teachings of Chassidus in a way that it becomes sustained in ourselves and therefore sustains us, we become true vessels to march towards Moshiach. And when Moshiach comes, may it be now, we won't be strangers because we'll hear words that are familiar to us. Now, when Moshiach comes and you'll hear Yispar Nasun, you'll know, I know what that means. That means that the teaching of Chassidus have to sustain me. When you hear even the word Chabad and what it means, when you understand the development of the mystical tradition of Judaism throughout time, you see that it's a march towards a day when these secrets will be accessible and available to everyone, and it will be the pursuit of our lives in a comfortable and happy way with all the distractions of war and poverty and jealousy and negativity out of the way, and instead all we have is an uncomplicated relationship with Hashem through the teachings of Chassidus. L'chaim.
I have a question in the statement. When the Alter Rebbe had something in prison,
Yeah.
he was really saying, would I continue with Chabad Chassidus or just go back to generic?
Ah, very good.
Right?
Bruce just put it perfectly.
What was the question?
No, he didn't say. He said a statement.
Oh.
The statement is that the Alter Rebbe wasn't really asking, "Should I stop?" He was saying, "Should I revert back to what you were doing before?"
Yeah.
Exactly that. That's yeah.
And my statement is, the famous statement we always say is, turn away from evil and do good. So that seems analogous to what you said. Because turn away is like the jolt. Okay? Turn us away. And to do good is to prepare us for the stage in the
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, it's 100% true. That one of them, but there's another, I think another important thing to understand, which is everything is to match up to our needs. And I think the pattern of this talk is that the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov would not be enough for us today. Today we need, think about it, even the way we operate today, we want to understand it, we want to absorb it, we want to make it our own. It's not enough to just accept someone else's inspiration.
Now let the brain start. Class is over.
Yes, David.
Seven successive degrees of unity.
Correct.
Like more and more, arguably matched by successive degrees of Hartford.
Yes.
Like the point, especially with the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, they really created the basis for Chassidus as we know it. In other words, that was a prerequisite level of Gilui, creating a more expansive Isparnisu, which actually was the sustenance or the basis.
Correct.
No?
Yes. Let me expand on that a little bit. When the Rebbe speaks about his predecessor, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe often speaks about him as if his greatest accomplishment was translating Chassidus. The Frierdiker Rebbe started the enterprise of publishing Chabad Chassidus in other languages. Right? So this is the next level of making it accessible and digestible to more people. Really, it could be said, because you said every Rebbe takes it to the next level, and it's true, and definitely, if you think about it also historically, like even the fact that the previous Rebbe moved Chabad to America, or that the Rebbe is the first Rebbe that became Rebbe in America. It's a whole new breaking of boundaries. But there's a word, the Rebbe says it here, is quoting a letter of the Baal Shem Tov, that he says, the famous letter, that he says that Moshiach told him that Moshiach's going to come when his teachings, the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, will be spread chutza. Now, chutza means out there. Now, but you have to understand, David, what did the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim envision as in chutza? To them it meant someone who didn't learn Chassidus yet, but a totally firm Jew who's, learning Gemara, but didn't learn Chassidus. So chutza for them was that. And then you keep on going in history, and what does chutza mean? Chutza means right on the other tracks of the side of the tracks of the shtetl. Today we understand chutza means the entire universe. Chutza means, the streets of America in which we reside, in which we spread Torah and Chassidus.
Everything you said, the continuation is today, the Rebbe and the whole story. I was just learning another stuff over there about this idea that there was another Xavier, in a way it was even greater, on the
Mittler Rebbe.
Rebbe, because he spread it in a whole different way, and like he was saying, there was a whole new revelation beyond anything that ever could have imagined.
Yeah. So
It was Chachman.
exactly in Chabad itself, Chachma is the spark. So it's almost like in Chabad itself, the Alter Rebbe is like the Baal Shem Tov of Chabad, and the Mittler Rebbe is like
Is it the same difference or is it another difference? Because it sounds like a whole different.
I don't know. That sikh is a different sikh. You have to, because it's an interesting. Here's the thing: once you understand this paradigm, then you have to justify every obstacle, why it would happen, and every overcoming of that obstacle by what means. So that's yeah.
It's interesting. We say that today, in a sense, is a greater.
Oh, so in the introduction to the sikha, if you look, this sikha is not a sikha on Yud Tes Kislev. It's a sikha on Motzei Shabbat. It's Motzei Zeis Chanukah. It's during the Sfarim case, and the Rebbe is almost. It's very clear. The Rebbe is speaking about the current battle. So you see that the model repeats itself, but on a much only because we push the envelope on Yefutza Manesecha Chutza more and more. And not only quantity, but also quality, because the Alter Rebbe changed the whole nature of what it means, Chassidus, so to speak. Didn't change the nature, but it took it to the level where we could process it through our minds. So now it's a new Gzeda. So yeah, I think that's the Mittler Rebbe is Rafi.
It's more about a general knowledge. I know that in Kabbalah there's a tradition that you have to be over 40 to study Kabbalah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in the Chabad, Chassidus, the way we teach it is, do you teach it everything for everyone at any time? Like if you're a kid, you get the same amount of Chassidus than if you're a 40-year-old, 50-year-old? Or are there different levels of Chassidus that you have within the Chabad philosophy?
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. And I would say this. Systematically, the answer is no. Systematically, the answer is everything's available to everyone.
But
However,
on a different level, right?
No, it's available. There's nobody stopping anybody from doing anything. In other words, there's no restrictions.
But the pedagogy.
The pedagogy is like this. Not all yeshivas are exactly the same way, but there definitely is a method to teach a kid some basics of Chassidus. And when I say a kid, I mean usually you're talking about, this maybe a little after they start learning the Talmud. So let's say 7th grade, 8th grade, but usually the real study of Chassidus starts, I would say in high school, maybe 1 year before. And there is a sort of a system. And the system is you start with lighter Maimarim that deal with maybe more basic things, don't go back and forth, but rather introduce some basic fundamental ideas. It doesn't have to be from one Rebbe or another. Like the Alter Rebbe himself have some Maimarim that are more simple. But I will tell you one thing. I just went through this with one of my children. And she gave me a lot of nachas. She called me and she said she wants to start learning Tanya because Yud Tes Kislev is coming. She wants to learn Tanya every day. The question is, should she learn the text of Tanya? Or today there's many resources where you could get a review, you get a podcast, you could get a translation, you could get a summary. So what should she do? So I went back to my own experience, and I'll tell you that many, I don't know, I think today is much better, but I would say many people in my age bracket need a re-education on Tanya after they learn it the first time. Because the first time you learn it, it seems very repetitive and boring and irrelevant because you just read the words and translate. When really, if you study the Tanya, you see, it's almost like the Tanya it's not even about God and about religion. It's about understanding ourselves. The first, definitely the first 12, but maybe the first 25. Most of the time, it's understanding our inner workings, and of course, how to activate it towards the service of Hashem. So if we can understand Tanya in that way, and I think people who learn Tanya as adults, you get a little bit of a bird's eye view, you get an introduction, you understand. We have a much greater appreciation for it. So I think, therefore, the rollout of Chassidus has become, I would say, more tailor-made to the age over time for the better, but not systematically. When I say systematically, there's no restrictions on anybody to do anything. But yes, in the school systems, definitely there's a rollout, and we only start learning the heavy stuff probably only in the college level, which is the yeshiva level, after Masifta, after high school.
If you were to condense it for a child, like the first lesson of Tanya, what would the, you know, there's the story about teaching the Torah on 1 foot, right? You know, what would be, if you were to attempt to try and condense a principle of Tanya to
How old is
something
it?
very simple for like the first lesson?
How old is the
for
child?
a child? The first lesson.
Oh.
Maybe like you're saying, it's 7th, 8th grade. You're now introducing these concepts. What would be like the?
Yeah, so what would you say? I think, it's off the top of my head, I think what I would tell the kid is, not only are your struggles normal, they are cherished by Hashem. And therefore, don't see any internal conflict that you have as a blemish or as a sign of something wrong with you, but rather see it as a tool to become closer to Hashem.
Wow. Beautiful. L'chaim.